The navy suitcase lay open on the rug. Its zipper gleamed in the cold rain. Liam Vance adjusted his silver cufflinks, his thumb rubbing initials that were not mine. His phone screen flashed a message from VM. A cruel smile touched his lips. He was not packing after 8 years of marriage. He was checking out of a hotel room he had already forgotten. "I was going to tell you after tomorrow's board meeting," Liam said, his voice completely flat. "But Victoria thinks waiting is cruel." I froze near the doorway. My fingers were numb against the paper grocery bag in my arms. Inside, a bottle of Cabernet pressed hard against my wrist, the exact vintage from our wedding. Rain soaked my coat, smelling of wet wool and a faint jasmine perfume that was not mine. "Victoria," I whispered. The name tasted like ash. Liam sighed, looking at me like a failing accountant. "Victoria Montgomery. You met her at the gala." I remembered a silver dress, a loud laugh, and an emerald ring sparkling under chandelier lights. "She's married, Liam." "Separated," he snapped, jerking his zipper shut with a harsh metallic screech. "Her husband only cares about acquisitions. She knows what it feels like to be completely invisible beside someone successful." A bitter laugh choked in my throat. Liam was chief operating officer, only because I spent years at my grandmother's kitchen table creating the cost analysis algorithm that saved his restaurant chain. I built Hale Analytics. Yet for 8 years, he introduced me as his quiet, behind-the-scenes wife. Now he stood in our bedroom, explaining invisibility to me. "What do you want, Liam?" "A life that doesn't feel like an endless audit. Victoria makes me feel alive." Footsteps hurried up the stairs. Our housekeeper appeared at the door, her face pale. "Mrs. Vance, a Mr. Julian Sterling is downstairs." Liam froze. The color drained from his face. I set the heavy grocery bag on a chair, glass clinking softly against wood. "Show him up." Julian Sterling walked in without asking. His sharp, measured footsteps echoed in the hall. At 40, the billionaire owner of Sterling Capital radiated a cold, dangerous authority. His charcoal overcoat was slick with rain, bringing the sharp smell of wet asphalt and ozone into the warm room. He looked at the suitcase, then turned dark, unreadable eyes to me. "Mrs. Vance," Julian said quietly, "I am sorry we meet like this." Liam stepped forward, puffing his chest. "This is private, Sterling. Get out of my house." "It stopped being private when you charged a Paris hotel suite to my logistics subsidiary," Julian replied smoothly. "Victoria used my corporate flight account for your return tickets. Neither of you is discreet." I looked at Liam. "Paris? You said you were negotiating vendor contracts." Liam swallowed hard, looking away. "Victoria joined me afterward." Julian reached into his coat and placed a manila envelope on the dresser. Receipts and high-resolution photos slid out. "Copies for you, Mrs. Vance. My lawyers advised me to document asset transfers before Victoria moved marital funds. I saw your husband's name and knew you deserved the truth." Liam took an aggressive step toward Julian. "You don't get to threaten us in my house." "Your house?" I asked quietly. Liam stopped. His eyes darted to the floorboards. "This house belonged to my grandmother, Eleanor Hale. I mortgaged it to bail out his first failed expansion. I paid the loan with royalties from code Liam claimed as company property." Panic finally flickered in his eyes. I pulled out the photos. The top image showed Liam kissing Victoria near a private hangar. The date stamp read 8 months ago, the night he claimed a flight delay kept him stranded on my birthday. I did not scream. I placed the photos back, set the envelope down, and met his gaze. "Take the suitcase," I said. "Leave the key." Liam stared at me. "That's it. 8 years, and that's all." "You made your choice 8 months ago. I am accepting it faster than you expected." His ego wanted a scene. I saw his nostrils flare, and his knuckles turn white on the suitcase handle. He wanted tears to show Victoria that 2 women were fighting over him. I gave him nothing. Liam brushed past Julian at the door, gritting his teeth. "She'll never love you, Sterling." Julian did not even turn. That question no longer concerns me. The front door slammed downstairs. The house fell silent, save for the rain tapping the glass. "There is more, Mrs. Vance," Julian said softly. "What else?" "Victoria did not just spend money. She stole acquisition files from my office regarding your company." "What files?" "Liam has been secretly negotiating to sell your company to Sterling Capital for 6 months. He claimed sole ownership of your cost analysis algorithm. My team suspects fraud." My hand tightened around the envelope. I wrote that original code under my maiden name, Hannah Hale. Liam knew it. He had asked me to delay commercial licensing to simplify taxes. "When is the board meeting?" I asked. "Tomorrow at 10. The puzzle locked together. Liam was not leaving out of honesty. He left because tomorrow's fraudulent sale would make him rich enough to survive a divorce without me. Julian looked at me with respect, not pity. That is also my conclusion. I walked to the chair, picked up the wine, and placed it inside the cabinet. "Mr. Sterling," I said, turning to him, "would you like coffee? We have a transaction to stop." A faint light touched Julian's face. "Yes, but please call me Julian." To understand how I stood in that rainy room, ready to dismantle my husband's empire in 12 hours, we must go back 6 months earlier, to the quiet days before the betrayals were signed in ink. The morning sun hit the glass towers of downtown Boston with a cold glare. At 7:30, I pushed through the revolving doors of Vance Hospitality headquarters. I wore a tailored cream suit and my mother's pearl earrings. My eyes were clear. My posture was straight. For 8 years, I walked into this building as Liam's quiet wife, blending into the background. Today, I walked in as an auditor reclaiming her work. I met my legal team in a private conference room on the 16th floor. Julian had connected me with Naomi, a sharp commercial attorney whose office smelled of old paper and black coffee. We did not discuss revenge. We discussed strategy. I knew the law. Self-help measures, like cutting off software access illegally, would give Liam grounds to sue me for tortious interference. I was too smart to give him that weapon. At 8:15, Naomi filed an emergency petition with the state business court. We requested a temporary restraining order. The injunction sought to freeze all transfer of the Hale Analytics core code and block Liam from executing any sale involving my trade secrets. At 9:45, I rode the elevator to the 34th floor. The doors opened to polished marble and the faint, sweet scent of fresh lilies. Through the glass walls of the main boardroom, I saw Liam and Victoria. Liam stood at the head of the mahogany table, adjusting his tie with practiced confidence. Victoria sat beside him in a sleeveless crimson dress. Her diamond bracelet caught the morning light as she gestured toward a digital display on the wall. They were laughing with 3 independent board members, selling them a vision of instant wealth. The heavy double doors swung open. I walked in first. Julian followed, flanked by Naomi and a court-appointed special master carrying a leather briefcase. The room went dead silent. The air grew instantly heavy. Liam's smile faltered. "Hannah, what is the meaning of this? Spouses are not permitted in executive acquisition briefings." "I am not here as your spouse, Liam," I said, my voice steady and quiet. "I am here as the sole owner of Hale Analytics." Victoria leaned back in her leather chair, crossing her arms. Her crimson lipstick stretched into a mocking smile. "This is embarrassing, Hannah. Bitterness doesn't look good on you. Liam built this operational system. You wrote a basic spreadsheet years ago, And now you want to ruin his moment. Naomi did not argue. She placed a sealed white envelope in front of each board member. This is a signed temporary restraining order from the state business court, Naomi announced, her voice cutting through the room like steel. Effective immediately, Mr. Vance is prohibited from transferring, licensing, or presenting the Hale Analytics platform. Any attempt to proceed with the Sterling Capital acquisition will result in immediate contempt of court. The chief financial officer flipped open his envelope, his face turning pale. Liam, you certified under oath that the IP rights were fully assigned to Vance Hospitality last year. They were. Liam stammered, sweat breaking out along his hairline. Hannah signed the corporate transfer documents. The court-appointed special master opened his briefcase and placed a tablet flat on the table. The electronic signature certificate was audited 3 hours ago, the examiner stated. The digital certificate was generated from Mr. Vance's personal laptop at 2:13 a.m. 3 weeks ago. The IP address matches his home office. Mrs. Vance's primary device was inactive at that time. Liam's jaw tightened. It was a procedural misunderstanding. Hannah gave me verbal authority to handle corporate filings. I gave you authority to manage vendor contracts. I corrected him. Not authority to forge my name on my grandmother's work. Victoria turned her head, glaring at Liam. The mock confidence left her face, replaced by sharp annoyance. Liam, you said the paperwork was completely clean. It is clean. Liam hissed back. It is a fraudulent forgery, Naomi said smoothly. And we have also submitted access logs to the court. 4 nights ago, portions of the Hale Analytics source documentation were downloaded from the company server using Ms. Montgomery's credentials. Those files were emailed to a venture fund in Singapore owned by her cousin. Silence slammed into the room. The board members stared at Victoria in horrified fascination. Victoria's posture stiffened. I was arranging bridge financing for the expansion. By exporting proprietary software you do not own. Julian spoke for the first time, his voice low and cold. My security team tracked the transfer the moment it hit the international gateway. Sterling Capital is officially withdrawing its acquisition proposal. The board chairman cleared his throat and tapped his pen against the table. Effective immediately, Liam Vance is placed on administrative leave pending a forensic investigation. All acquisition talks are terminated. Liam stared at me, his mouth trembling. He looked smaller inside his expensive suit. I stood tall, smoothing the front of my cream jacket. I felt no surge of anger. The air in the room felt clean for the first time in 8 years. I turned and walked out of the boardroom, my heels clicking rhythmically on the marble floor. I pushed through the heavy glass doors and stepped out into the crisp Boston morning. The sun was high now, warming my face. I took a deep, clean breath. My work was mine again. My name was mine again. The board tried to offer me Liam's office that afternoon, but I knew my place was no longer in their building. I was ready to build something that belonged entirely to me. The morning after the board meeting, I rented a small brick office overlooking Boston Harbor. I hung a wooden sign beside the heavy oak door. Hale Analytics. The room smelled of fresh paint, sandalwood, and salt air. I hired 2 junior accountants whom Liam had fired months ago for questioning his expense reports. We bought 3 standing desks and secondary monitors. I was no longer cleaning up someone else's mess behind closed doors. I was building my own firm. For 2 weeks, I worked 14 hours a day. My eyes burned under the harsh fluorescent lights. My fingers grew stiff from typing on my mechanical keyboard, the rhythm ticking like a steady clock in the quiet office. I audited 3 full years of Vance Hospitality financial ledgers. I examined every invoice, vendor contract, and tax schedule. On a rainy Thursday at midnight, My screen revealed an anomaly. Vance Hospitality managed 4 regional properties under contract for the Hope Feeding Foundation. The nonprofit provided daily meals and emergency medical nutrition for low-income children. Under the management agreement, 2% of gross dining revenues were deposited into a restricted capital improvement fund. The money was earmarked to build accessible family kitchens and buy commercial refrigeration units for local shelters. Nearly $1.5 million was missing from the fund. I tracked the outgoing wire transfers. Every payment had been approved by Liam. The money flowed directly to Bellwether Media, a shell entity registered in Delaware under Victoria Montgomery's maiden name. Attached to the ledger were digital invoices for brand consulting and influencer outreach. I pulled the public land registry filings Julian's legal team had shared with us. 3 weeks after the first transfer, Bellwether Media wired $600,000 as a deposit for a seaside villa in Lake Como, Italy. The remaining cash paid for luxury watches, designer clothing, and private jet charters. They took food from hungry children to buy a view of an Italian lake. My hands trembled against the edge of my desk. The room felt suddenly cold. My grief for my failed marriage dissolved completely. It turned into something hard, clear, and sharp as flint. I did not cry. I did not smash my glass. I opened a fresh audit folder on my encrypted drive and began cross-referencing every voucher number. I did not record private phone calls or make threats. I knew the law in Massachusetts. Illegal wiretaps were inadmissible and would ruin our standing. Instead, I prepared a formal forensic package. I gathered bank statements, IP routing logs, and certified tax returns. My attorney submitted the file directly to the United States Department of Justice and the Internal Revenue Service Whistleblower Office. Under federal law, the submission was legal, protected, and immutable. At 8 o'clock the following evening, Julian knocked softly on my office door. He wore a charcoal wool coat damp with rain. He carried 2 paper cups of dark coffee from the corner bakery. The rich scent of roasted coffee beans filled the room. He set the cups on my desk and looked at the whiteboard covered in red flowcharts. Naomi told me about the Hope Feeding filings. Julian said, his voice low in the quiet room. The evidence is airtight. They left a trail of digital breadcrumbs. I replied, taking a sip of the warm coffee. Greed makes people careless. Julian stepped closer to the desk, his hands in his pockets. My firm can absorb your legal costs, Hannah. Sterling Capital has a dedicated litigation fund. You don't need to drain your personal savings for expert witnesses. I looked up into his dark, steady eyes. His offer was genuine, but my chest tightened with an old, familiar instinct. No, Julian, I said firmly. We will execute a formal consulting agreement. Hale Analytics will bill Sterling Capital for the forensic work we provide for your subsidiary audits. You will pay our standard hourly rate. Julian watched me silently. You don't trust my motives? I respect your help, I said, leaning against my desk. But I spent 8 years letting a man control my work while calling it teamwork. I am not trading a controlling husband for a ruling benefactor. If we stand together, it will be as independent partners. A faint, warm smile touched the corners of Julian's mouth. There was no offense in his eyes, only deep respect. That is fair, Julian said quietly. He reached into his coat pocket and placed a small brass key on the wooden table. My family owns a small cottage in Newport. It overlooks the ocean. It has a desk, high-speed internet, and a quiet porch. The press will find your townhome soon. You can use the cottage to finish the final audit report. I looked at the key. What are the conditions? No conditions. No staff, no cameras, no expectations. You work alone for as long as you need. I reached out and closed my hand around the cool metal key. That night, I drove down the coastal highway to Newport. Rain tapped against the windshield. For 8 years, Liam had made me feel like every conflict was my fault. He called me insecure whenever I asked for credit. He made me doubt my own memory. Sitting at the wooden desk in the quiet Newport cottage, listening to the dark ocean waves crash against the rocks below, the last lingering doubts vanished. I was not the cause of Liam's betrayal. I was not weak for trusting him. I was simply the person who was going to make sure the truth was recorded in ink. The whistleblower filings reached the federal prosecutor's desk 4 days later. The trap was officially set, and all we had to do was wait for Liam to walk into it. 5 days after the whistleblower filings, Victoria sent me a text message. She requested a private meeting at the Oak Room, a high-end restaurant near Boston Common. The invitation was written with fake warmth, claiming we were two smart women caught between bitter men. I accepted. I was not naive. I knew the law. I did not wear a hidden wire or record the conversation illegally. Instead, I formally notified the Department of Justice case agent. 2 federal investigators took a corner booth 45 minutes before my arrival. Victoria arrived 20 minutes late. She wore a cream cashmere coat and oversized sunglasses, her crimson heels clicking sharply on the dark oak floor. The restaurant smelled of seared steaks, expensive wine, and sweet cigar smoke. She sat down across from me, removing her glasses. Fatigue shadowed her eyes beneath heavy foundation. Her giant emerald ring was missing from her left hand. "You look well, Hannah," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Divorce seems to suit you." "You asked to settle something, Victoria," I said, my voice level. "State your terms." Victoria leaned forward over the white linen tablecloth. Her manicured fingers drummed nervously against her glass. "Liam is falling apart. He is blaming me for the Bellwether Media invoices. He claims I manipulated him." "Did you?" "Bellwether is a legitimate agency," she snapped, her eyes narrowing. "Projects get delayed. That is not fraud. The families at the Hope feeding shelters have waited 3 years for accessible kitchens." I replied calmly. "Your Lake Como Villa deposit was not delayed." Victoria's posture stiffened. Her nostrils flared. "Julian told you. I read the wire logs." I corrected her. "Julian uses people," Victoria hissed, leaning closer. Her breath smelled of stale mints and gin. "He collects damaged things when he can call it a rescue. Do you think he respects you, Hannah? He studies people the way he studies failing companies. He finds what is undervalued, buys it cheap, and waits. You are useful to him because your software will make sterling capital hundreds of millions." The accusation was designed to trigger my deepest fear, that I was replacing one controlling man with another. But her words fell flat against my chest. "If Julian only wants my software and Liam only wants your connections, then why are you here?" I asked. "You removed your ring. You haven't slept. What are you afraid of, Victoria?" Victoria's polished composure cracked. "Liam moved money into accounts under my name without my full consent. Julian froze my credit cards. Vance Hospitality froze Liam's accounts. We need liquidity until the legal dust settles." She opened her designer handbag and slid a cashier's check across the white tablecloth. $500,000. "Sign the IP assignment," Victoria whispered, her voice tight with desperation. "Withdraw the whistleblower claim. Walk away with $500,000. You can start over with dignity." I looked at the check, then raised my eyes to meet hers. "Whose money is this, Victoria?" "A private investor. The venture fund in Singapore." I asked quietly. "The one managed by your cousin, which received stolen hail analytics source code last week." Victoria froze. The color drained from her face. "You can't prove I sent anything." "You just proved you know what needs proving," I said. I pushed the check back across the table with one finger. "You think every woman has a price because you sold yours long ago," I told her, my voice clear and unwavering. "Julian didn't buy my loyalty. I chose to stand beside him because he treats me as an equal. I am not withdrawing the filings, and I am not selling my self-worth for $500,000. Victoria slammed her palm against the table, rattling the silverware. "You were supposed to be easy. Liam said you would sign anything if he sounded disappointed enough." "Liam was right for 8 years," I said softly. "That is why he is wrong today." I stood up from the table. At that moment, the 2 federal investigators rose from their corner booth. They approached our table, showing their credentials. Victoria's eyes widened in horror as she realized the entire exchange, her offer of cash in exchange for withdrawing a federal whistleblower claim, had been witnessed and recorded under a lawful federal warrant. "Victoria Montgomery," the lead agent said, his voice ringing across the quiet dining room. "You are under arrest for obstruction of justice and attempted witness tampering." Victoria scrambled backward, her chair screeching against the floorboards. "This is a mistake. Hannah, tell them." I picked up my purse and looked down at her. "You told me we should settle this like women. This is what accountability looks like." The agents led Victoria away through the side exit, her cream coat dragging against the floor. Afterward, I stood on the sidewalk outside the restaurant. The cool Boston breeze swept over my face, carrying the scent of autumn leaves and fresh salt air. I took a deep, steady breath. Victoria had tried to make me doubt Julian, and she had tried to make me doubt myself. But as I walked down the street toward my office, my boots clicking firmly on the pavement, I knew the truth. I was no longer afraid of being invisible. I was no longer afraid of standing alone. With Victoria in federal custody, Liam lost his last ally. 2 days later, the Department of Justice issued formal arrest warrants for both of them. The Ashford Hotel ballroom glittered under massive crystal chandeliers. The air smelled of roasted prime rib, melted butter, and expensive champagne. Hundreds of wealthy donors sat at round tables draped in heavy white silk. Liam Vance stood at the center of the room. He wore a sharp, custom-tailored black tuxedo. Camera flashes burst around him like white lightning. He smiled. He shook hands. He looked like a king untouched by the rumors surrounding his company. He stepped up to the clear glass podium. He tapped the microphone. A sharp, high hum echoed across the quiet ballroom. "True leadership," Liam said, his voice rich, steady, and loud, "is built on honesty. It is built on transparency. We owe the children of the Hope Feeding Foundation our absolute best. Greed has no place in charity." The crowd erupted into polite applause. Liam smiled widely, soaking in the admiration. He turned toward the giant LED screen behind him. The screen was scheduled to play a heartwarming video of the shelter kitchens. The screen went black. A second later, it flashed bright, blinding white. The blue and gold seal of the United States Department of Justice filled the display. The room fell into a dead, suffocating silence. Bold black text scrolled across the massive screen. It was not a tribute video. It was a live press release. Indictment: Liam Vance. Wire fraud. Identity theft. $1.50 million embezzlement from Hope Feeding Foundation. Someone in the front row gasped. A glass dropped and shattered against the marble floor. The sharp crash broke the silence. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Reporters shouted. Cameras fired in a frantic, blinding wave. Liam's smile vanished. His face turned the color of wet ash. He gripped the edges of the glass podium, his knuckles turning pure white. He looked off the stage, searching for an exit. The heavy double doors at the back of the ballroom slammed open. A dozen federal agents walked in. They wore dark suits and blue windbreakers, with FBI printed in bright yellow letters. Their heavy boots pounded against the hardwood floor. They did not pause. They marched straight down the center aisle, dividing the crowd. The lead agent stepped onto the stage. He did not lower his voice. "Liam Vance," the agent barked over the noise of the crowd. "You are under arrest for federal wire fraud and embezzlement." The agent grabbed Liam's wrists. He twisted them behind Liam's back. The cold, heavy steel of the handcuffs snapped shut with a sharp, brutal click. The microphone picked up the sound, broadcasting the metallic snap to the entire room. Liam did not fight. He simply stared at the cameras, his ego shattering in real time under the bright ballroom lights. 2 hours later, the smell of roasted prime rib was replaced by the scent of stale coffee and floor wax. Inside the federal building, the FBI placed Liam and Victoria into 2 separate, windowless interrogation rooms. The walls were painted a dull, sickly gray. The fluorescent lights buzzed with a low, headache-inducing hum. A federal prosecutor walked into Liam's room. He tossed a thick paper file onto the metal table. It landed with a heavy slap. "Here is the deal," the prosecutor said, his voice flat and clinical. "We are offering the same deal to Ms. Montgomery next door. The first person to sign a plea bargain and provide evidence against the other gets an 80% sentence reduction. You have 15 minutes. The prisoner's dilemma. Liam began to sweat. A drop rolled down his temple and stung his eye. His arrogance completely collapsed. He leaned forward, his voice trembling. It was Victoria. Liam spat out rapidly. She set up bellwether media. She booked the Italian villa. She manipulated the invoices. "I just signed them. I will testify to everything." The prosecutor did not smile. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black audio player. He pressed a button. Liam's own voice filled the small room. "Just copy the digital signature from her tax file, Victoria. Hannah never checks the corporate logs. Make sure the date looks like last month." Liam stopped breathing. His eyes widened in absolute terror. "You are too late, Mr. Vance," the prosecutor said coldly. "Ms. Montgomery did not wait for the 15-minute timer. She gave us this recording 3 days ago. In their rush to save themselves, the 2 lovers tore each other apart. They did the government's job for them." The sentencing hearing took place in the federal courthouse 3 months later. The courtroom smelled of old dust and polished oak. The judge sat high on the bench, looking down at the 2 defendants. Victoria stood first. Because of her early cooperation, she avoided the maximum penalty. The judge struck the wooden gavel. A sharp, final crack. She received 14 months in federal prison, 3 years of supervised release, and an order to liquidate her assets for complete restitution. She kept her head down, her face pale and drawn. Then Liam stood up. His tailored suits were gone. He wore a baggy, faded orange jumpsuit. He looked small. He looked old. "Your actions were not a single mistake," the judge said, his voice echoing across the silent room. "They were a series of calculated, cruel decisions. You stole from sick children to fund a life of luxury." The gavel struck again. 42 months in federal prison. Officers grabbed Liam's arms. As they led him toward the side door, he looked back at the gallery. He looked at me. He expected to see anger. He expected to see a woman still broken by his betrayal. I gave him nothing. I looked at him with the same mild disinterest I would give a stranger on the street. I turned my head and walked out the double doors. I stepped out onto the wide stone steps of the courthouse. The cold winter air hit my face, sharp and clean. The bright afternoon sun warmed my skin. A cluster of reporters waited at the bottom of the steps. Microphones shoved forward. A young journalist with a recorder shouted over the crowd, "Hannah, Mrs. Hale, your ex-husband is going to prison. Is this the sweet revenge you were hoping for?" I stopped. I looked at the reporter. I did not raise my voice, but the microphones caught every word. "This is not revenge," I said, my voice perfectly steady. "Revenge requires me to care about him. I do not. This is justice for the families at the Hope feeding shelters. And for me, it is just a Tuesday." I walked down the steps. I did not look back at the courthouse. I was no longer a victim. I was no longer someone's quiet shadow. I had completely reclaimed my life, my name, and my future. With the past finally buried behind steel bars, I walked away from the flashing cameras and headed toward the harbor, ready to step into the light of my own making. 6 months after the trial, the morning sun broke over the Boston harbor. The sky was a pale, clear blue. Crisp sea air swept over the rooftop garden of the newly renovated Hope Feeding Foundation Center. The smell of fresh pine wood, green grass, and blooming jasmine filled the warm air. Below us, the new kitchen was fully operational. Stainless steel counters gleamed under bright lights. Commercial refrigerators hummed smoothly. Small children in wheelchairs rolled easily through wide, custom-built doorways. They laughed as volunteers served warm, nutritious meals on colorful trays. I stood near the rooftop railing, watching them. I wore a simple white linen dress. The cool breeze moved through my hair. My skin was warm. My eyes were clear. My firm, Hale Analytics, had managed the financial recovery. Together with Sterling Capital, we guaranteed the restoration budget. Every missing dollar was returned to the children. I was no longer an accountant hiding in the dark. I was a CEO, a business owner, and a woman who owned her work. Footsteps sounded against the gravel path behind me. Slow, steady, and familiar. Julian walked out onto the rooftop garden. He wore a dark navy jacket without a tie. He held 2 white porcelain plates with slices of berry cake. He did not rush. He did not try to take up all the space. He simply walked over and stood beside me, leaving a comfortable distance between us. "The children love the new garden," Julian said softly. His voice was warm in the quiet morning air. "They deserve a place that was built for them," I replied, taking a small forkful of cake. The sweet taste of fresh raspberries melted on my tongue. Not a place built on broken promises. Julian set his plate on the wooden table beside us. He turned his body slightly toward me. The golden morning light caught the gray hair at his temples. He looked at me with deep respect, his dark eyes steady and clear. "I have something to discuss, Hannah," Julian said quietly. "It comes with no schedule, no corporate deadline, and no pressure." I raised an eyebrow, a faint smile touching my lips. "That is a very cautious opening from a man who buys companies." "There is no acquisition," Julian said, his voice dropping an octave. "No merger, no hostile takeover, and nothing about our work, our friendship, or the way I care about you changes regardless of your answer." He reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small, velvet box. He did not kneel down immediately. He did not try to create a dramatic scene for an audience. He stood right there, treating me as an equal partner. He opened the box. Inside sat a platinum ring. It did not feature a giant, flashy emerald like Victoria's ring. It held a clear, oval diamond set in a clean, simple band. Tucked neatly beneath the main setting was a tiny blue sapphire. "The blue stone belonged to my mother," Julian said softly. "She always told me that a new beginning should carry something old only if the old thing was kind." He met my eyes. "Hannah Hale," Julian said, his voice quiet, steady, and full of emotion. Will you build those ordinary mornings with me? My breath hitched in my throat. Warmth spread through my chest. Tears touched the corners of my eyes, but they were not tears of pain or regret. They were tears of quiet joy. I looked at the ring. Then I looked at the man who had stood beside me in courtroom hallways and boardrooms without ever trying to push me behind him. He had never tried to save me. He had simply given me the space to save myself. I had achieved complete financial independence. I had reclaimed my grandmother's house. I had built a thriving firm. I had forgiven myself for staying too long in a broken marriage. I held no hatred for Liam or Victoria. They were just ghosts locked behind steel bars. I had moved from being a victim to being the sole author of my own life. Yes, Julian, I said, my voice strong and clear. I will. A genuine, beautiful smile broke across Julian's face. He slid the ring onto my finger. The cool platinum rested comfortably against my skin. I looked up at him, a mischievous spark in my eyes. But I have one condition. Julian smiled, holding my hand. Name it. I am keeping my name. I said firmly. I am Hannah Hale. Julian laughed. The rich, warm sound echoed across the quiet rooftop garden. I would have been deeply disappointed if you said anything else, Ms. Hale. He pulled me gently into his arms. I leaned my head against his chest, listening to his steady heartbeat. The sun rose higher into the sky, casting a brilliant golden light over the entire city. The golden hour had arrived. The dark storm of betrayal, fraud, and fear was completely gone. Ahead lay ordinary mornings, honest partnership, and a future built on truth. I stood tall, free, proud, and entirely whole. The quiet woman who once hid behind her husband's shadow was gone forever. In her place stood a woman who owned her name, her mind, and her bright, unwritten future. All shadows must fade before the truth, and every pain is simply the start of a beautiful rebirth. Always remember, the right to write a new chapter of your life is forever in your hands. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment below so we know we're walking this journey together. Hope to see you on the next page.